I was invited to play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 early without playing the first one. And this is when I met some amazing creators and Warhorse's Sir Toby. The reason I bring this up is because the first question I received from Sir Toby with his bristling mustache and his thick European accent was, how many of you have played the first game? I was the only hand not raised. And then he looked at me and straight up said, then f you. And that's how I knew this game was going to become one of my favorites of all time. This video will contain some light story spoilers for KCD 1 and 2. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a game that I believe will sweep the gaming world for its size, depth, quality, and immersive feeling you just haven't felt in a game in years. You heard that 2025 is full of blockbuster successes like Monster Hunter Wilds, Doom, GTA 6, Elden Ring, Night Rain, Ghost of Yotei, and the list just goes on. 2025 is full of games. But while those are predictable experiences in some ways, Kingdom Come is just as fresh and unique that it should be the blockbuster hit you've come to expect like these others. I am telling you, as someone who didn't play the first game of Kingdom Come, I sat down and was blown away with the experience. I looked like the Wojak meme, and I immediately went home to get lost in the first game. The look of the game is pretty simple. In fact, it looks like if Rust was in medieval times. But until you've really given it a fair shake or watched one of the many long video essays on the game, it's hard to quantify how addicting this experience really is. You might have clicked this video wanting to get the second game, but without buying the first, and have fair questions. Like, will it be fine for you to understand? Will there be merits to playing the first one? Is it entirely necessary to beat the first one to get the second one? These questions will largely depend on the type of player that you are. On one hand, the second game rewards players of the first game for the knowledge that carries over and the general flow of the game through dialogue, cameos, locations that are addressed, and the stress of learning curves in the first game that you may not have to worry about in the second game. But oh boy, did I have to worry about some of those learning curves. The gameplay you're watching of the second one might look like someone who has never touched the first one, since my armor is a mismatch, my weapon stats are wrong, my combat is muddy at best, and I got lost a lot. And I think it's partially by design that all of these are the case. Look, a game is a game at the end of the day, but if the first game had Henry learning to become something that he wasn't supposed to be, then there's struggles Henry, and as an extension, you the player, would need to overcome. The first game has so many little learning curves that feel unique to the franchise, and it gives it that cult-like following. You don't just combine ingredients to get a potion. You have to follow the book recipe, then craft them in a minigame. You don't just pickpocket and grab an item from a list. You do this stressful give and take guessing game with a high chance of getting caught. You can't even read in the first game, and all the words are scrambled on every page, getting less scrambled as you pay for lessons with the money that you earned or stole by applying these other little learning curve mini games. You start off really weak. You're a nobody, someone who can't even fight properly, but you ascend through the side quests, the world learning, the gimmicks, and characters that all blend together to create an experience like no other. To stay on that hand, the second game gets into conflict rather quickly, but there's new lessons because Henry isn't quite the peasant he was in the first game, but you're still in new areas that Henry isn't quite equipped for. On the other hand, Henry still becomes a nobody again, who does have to learn some lessons. You were taught very early on how to make potions. You were taught very early on how to forge your own sword in a new blacksmithing minigame. And you're taught some of the basics. Not as many as the first game, but it's about as bang up of a job as you can ask for when the character is not your traditional RPG character, who is usually emotionless and gets talked to as the pronouns that they have or the job titles that they possess, instead of an individual name with inflections to reflect the characterization of them. The Kingdom Come community has deemed the first game Henry's simulator, since it's an open world RPG that doesn't have a character creator. This is a story about a character that has a life already built, yet the team at Warhorse have done a fantastic job of making him basic enough that you can still make Henry mold into a tyrannical freak who steals and kills his way through life, or you can make him a charismatic reader who gets better stats and dialogue while being drunk, or hanging out at the bathhouse a little too often. The closest example of this is really Cyberpunk 2077 with V. The endpoints of the major quests for V may be similar, but the journey is very different based on your own decisions. I will say that thankfully KCD2 does offer a lot of tutorials as you experience actions that don't take away from the experience of what you're doing, which is both good and bad. I really love that the first game gave you a firm grasp as you learn the basics from the Miller and Sir Hans. You were actively learning with Henry in these moments, but sometimes the tutorials felt long, like the hunting mission with Sir Hans hunting down some rabbits. That's essentially 2 whole in-game days of a tutorial, while KCD2 has essentially remedied a lot of these problems. You are taught more involved portions of tutorials like combat, smithing, and potions, but for the less involved portions of the game, there is only a pop-up on the screen. I think these pop-ups could have been more beneficial with less words on the screen and more in-game examples. Even a small wordless GIF on the screen, because the tutorials feel like good skip bait and they are very wordy. I know you just learned how to read, Henry, but goddamn. I got very lost playing my first 8 hours because I never played the first game, but I was still addicted to the loop because the game wasn't holding my hand at every step. I know I'm bouncing back and forth on a lot of these points here, but the main subject of the matter is that I really appreciated the tutorials that the second game gave me, and I wish that there was only a little bit more for somebody that did skip the first game to look over. While the first game had some really in-depth tutorials that I found very helpful and shaped my experience of the game, sometimes it overstayed its welcome. I can't talk about KCD2 without touching on the story and the early impressions that I had of it without playing the first, so I'll touch on some light spoilers here. In my first 8 hours of the second game, I learned a lot about the realistic world of KCD2, for the better and for the worse. In KCD2, you start with a simple goal: deliver a message from Ratai to Trotsky, but clearly things have gone astray. As a new player, you won't know who any of these people are, the significance of them, or the fan service level of reveal at seeing Sir Hans or Godwin. But what you will know is that war is claiming you, and aiming the crossbow is very hard. You are then thrown several weeks into the past, and this follows Henry of Skalitz after his climb through the rankings of Ratai and Sir Hans not on the brink of death. Both of them are hopeful as they're about to journey to Burgo, a kingdom so rich and powerful that it's bigger than anything we have ever seen. Almost like Warhorse is pulling your eyes to the screen and telling you that this is the sequel experience that you always wanted. You have one simple task: deliver a message to the king. Now, if you played the first game where it's just a normal day of delivering a sword to the king of Ratai, then turning into a life-altering massacre, you probably know that delivering a simple letter to another king in the second game means trouble. They really need to get Henry off of delivery duty. Shocker, you lose the letter to the king. You try to prove you are who you are saying you are, and you get pooped on. Fucking shit. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is integral in respecting the player's wits. You might think, why wouldn't these guys trust me? Like they knew somebody was sending a letter. But the KCD veterans would probably assume that there was some sort of intentional foul play with the lords towards Hans and Henry due to just having a hunch that something more is going on. And those veterans are right, as we find out that there's a wedding and some major politics at play with power imbalances that I will let you find more about. This is again what makes KCD as a franchise special. It lends its trust to the player that will find out what is really going on, or has those same questions that Hans and Henry have. It has dialogue that doesn't make me cringe, but instead gets me invested. The facial animations are a lot better here to add substance to this plot. But even if they do look a little bit robotic, what is being said and the way it's spoken has a genuinely humane feel that is difficult to quantify without playing it. I won't go further into the story section here, as I feel like it has only added to the first game. You have bigger castles, there's more Henry and Hans banter, there's less robotic faces, and just as much respect to the players. I also just loved how well this game ran compared to the first game. It could have been biased since my playtime was on a Starforge PC with the most up-to-date specs, but this is at 1440p with uncapped frames and max settings, and I didn't experience the frame drops I still have on the first game with a similar PC to this one at home. I think critics of the first game will be happy to hear this, but the bugs that I experienced in 2 were almost non-noticeable. There were no doubt some, but they were vanilla compared to the first game. While the game will no doubt have a bunch of small visual, sound, physics, and other bugs, I think I'll give it a pass since the scope is so large for a team that is about a quarter of the size of the big AAA companies. Plus, I almost treat these kinds of bugs like Bethesda bugs, where they just about contribute to the experience and have their own sort of nostalgic charm. They just don't take away from the overall game. As long as there's a game to play that has substance, I can always excuse bugs, but it's a night and day better polished game than the first one. And when I spoke to Sir Toby at the event, he assured me that this was the game Warhorse had wanted to make the whole time in regards to the overall experience, and of course that lends to bugs. If you don't know the story of Kingdom Come Deliverance, it was a Kickstarter project set to be the realistic medieval times and not a dragon-filled one. It was ambitious and delayed many times. It released in a buggy state, but it had passion and a community that wanted it to succeed. I'll be covering a video one day about KCD 1 and 2, so make sure you're subbed for that. Those lessons are felt in the second game, as it was told to be a bigger experience than the first one, with more fleshed out, well, everything. And I have nothing that counters that argument at all. After playing the first one now, I cannot even imagine how many hours are in the second game and how in-depth the decisions will be. In my 8 hours, I made decisions that nobody else really made, and we all chatted about how magical that feeling really was. Now for the elephant in the room, combat. In the first game, it was really hard to master, and sometimes left players frustrated with it, but the hardcore community would just say get good. What I believe is that KCD had combat that would aggravate you if you didn't pay attention to the most minuscule details. This included paying attention to shoulders, sword positions, dodges, and when to take a battle. Combine this with a heavy amount of slow motion and a lock-on system that made group battles frustrating, and it just boiled down to messy, even if it didn't take away a lot of the game for me. Of course, sometimes the game's combat would bug, and it was either impossible to win a duel with NPCs that learned from Batman, or it was so easy that you could bonk a knight on the head and they fell over. Sure, as you mastered the sword, you mastered all, but every weapon was literally the sword. No, I mean that, because in KCD, every single weapon had the same sword animation no matter what. I used the mace a lot because my stats took forever to reach a point where I could use a sword properly, and it was the same on literally everything I tried. Thankfully, in KCD 2, the combat looks a lot better. It's easier to focus lock on, there's less slow-mo, there's new combos and animations depending on the weapon type, and streamlined difficulties that didn't feel buggy. Although I only played 8 hours, so do with that what you will. In KCD 2, there is not only new weapons like the crossbow and an actual gun, but the new and old handheld weapons now have their own combat curve to learn. So not only are you forging your own weapons, you're also mastering them. All of these have RPG stats, and all of these skills can contribute to giving you the best possible experience. And that, my dear friend and viewer, is how you solve the elephant in the room problem. Just listen to people. There are still issues I found myself having in the game no matter what though. There was a lot of very wordy messaging and clutter that hurt my brain more than it helped in regards to tutorials and menu systems. It's fine if you understand the game well, but in those first few hours of the experience, shuffling through these menus could use some more proper guidance. And unfortunately, I was the palate of a new player in my 8 hours, and I was just overwhelmed. I still found that I started to grasp it more by the end, but there was a loop of me starting from a save state Gate that was further back than I was ready for. I believe the comprehensive depth of knowledge is there for a player with the patience to learn it, even down to the menus, but I do fear that not everyone will take the journey or have the patience to understand the menus, the stat requirements, the food spoiling, and more. At times, it almost feels like KCD 1 and 2 are like survival games because of this, just if you remove the building part. That comprehensive depth in a more complementative manner can be extended to a comparison point that I think should be a green flag to pick up this game. That was a very long sentence to say that I believe Kingdom Come Deliverance has that depth that Baldur's Gate had in terms of decision making and trade-offs. No, it doesn't reward every little thing, and no, it doesn't have fantasy like dragons, brain suckers, unrealistic avenues. The series just offers freedom and rewards your curiosity. The best example of this for me in the first game is when Henry was set to investigate a village that had been massacred. This led to a full search for the bandits responsible. Now, this could have been a very on-rails experience in which you eventually find the bandit camp and you set up a plan to destroy it with your whole war troop, or this can be a night out with a priest that you get drunk with and have a four-way with. A man running away from the bandits himself. An untrustworthy guy on the run who hid his stash of coin. A not-so-bright man who leads you to them, and the ability to break into the base in any way that you can. You could also go at night when they're asleep and scout it out if you wanted to. Or you could do what I did and throw on some cumin armor and have a high enough speech level to pass by the guards. You can sabotage their arrows by burning them. You can poison their food. You can even witness a cutscene that adds more depth to this camp that is completely optional. I'm sure there is an option somewhere to just kill the whole camp without the army either, but I haven't tested that myself because I'm just not good enough at this game. This applied to even my journey to get there. I knew I had to kill a couple of bandits for a man named Ginger, but they just kept killing me. So I came later in the day when they were separated, and I killed them one at a time. In KCD 2, the main quest follows the exact same mindset. You are tasked with getting into this royal wedding, but you have so many different paths to get there that I don't have footage for, unfortunately, but I was told by Sir Toby that you could get there by forging a sword with the blacksmith and using that as a gift, or you could get some work with the millers and learn their secrets, even buying a suit to get in, or you could just pursue some ambitious ideas to get into this dang wedding. And that, again, is the magic of KCD 1 and 2, just like Baldur's Gate 3 had before. If you wanted an anecdote of the studio that's making the game, then there's this. When we were testing, there was an idea involving the horse trader and Pebbles recognizing the player, since Pebbles was the horse from the first game. We brought an idea involving Pebbles up, and without skipping a beat, the Warhorse team was called immediately. So yes, I do believe that not only is KCD 2 that good of a game that rewards players for their curiosity, I also believe it's a game made by players. I would deem this game like if The Witcher and Red Dead 2 had a baby, but with the freedom of objective that Baldur's Gate 3 gave to the world. Look, I love a lot of games out there, and as you guys know, I love some Elden Ring and some Zelda, and just like those games, Kingdom Come is a game with a level of care that feels lost in this corporate ladder we find games in today. A cool idea we had turned into a phone call, and will probably become a feature because when you have a team that can just chat with each other, this is possible. Games are so large now, but really the best ideas come from games that weren't held back by different visions of the game. This is the passion that can happen when you let a smaller team take on a game that is hundreds of hours long. It will come with bugs, it will come with frustrations, but ultimately it will be an experience that made gaming, well, gaming. At the beginning of my playtest, Sir Toby ushered a big fuck you to me for not playing the first game. But by the end, you could see in his eyes how much it meant that we took time to play something that was made with passion and soul. A big hug was exchanged and tears fell down his face. And that's how I knew that the game was special. It was made for the player's experience, not to be sold as a salad of catchy taglines. I left that playtest wanting to talk about how much I loved the game with all of the frustrations it made me feel. This level of soul is what games should strive to be. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Warhorse for sponsoring my time to play the game.